Hi everyone. So this is me talking about the results from my second survey, the public perception of science. I think firstly I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that answered the second survey, and it is quite different from the first one. The first one we went into why people don't trust scientists, the what is it? Conspiracy theories behind pharmaceutical companies, how they're in it to make money. Are vaccines safe? So the first survey was very much at the beginning of the pandemic, just trying to gauge people's thoughts into what was the most concerning for them and how I could answer those questions to the best of my abilities at the time. And a year on, I thought for completeness, it would be nice to see what people learned, what has changed, and how do people view science? How do people view scientists, pharmaceutical companies, and just the whole science industry, as well as what have people learned from this, and how can scientists, science communicators, or just both sides of the dialogue how can both sides better understand each other? So this video will address where did people get their information from? So basically the questions in my survey. Official media such as news and stuff like that versus social media channels. The importance of science communication. Moving forward, what are people concerned about? And hopefully how I'll be able to try and help tackle that like I did with my first survey. And where do scientists stand currently? Like, where do we stand with people? So let's get into this. So to begin, a good chunk, more than half, didn't take part in the first survey, but it just goes to show the different people that are paying attention. And I'm still so grateful for everybody that did. And it was similar to my last survey. So about 83% said they had a science degree at university level. So that does not specifically imply that they did biology till uni, but they have a science degree. So in my opinion, I think they would have already a slightly different view of science and scientists, as opposed to the general public that do not work in science or have not been around science for a bit or since like GCSE level. Again, the people that took part were mainly from the people that mainly interact with the stuff that I do. So the UK, the US, Sierra Leone, and other places such as Malawi, South Africa, the UAE and Canada. And of this group of people that answered, 15% had or have contracted COVID. So I first set out just to ask, where did the vaccinated people get their information from? Because I asked a few people, are you vaccinated? 26% of people were vaccinated. Quickly, the age range, majority were between 18 to 25, but there were groups within the 25-30 and 30 to and 40 and above. Let's first get into reporting of COVID headlines, like reporting of COVID in general. So I asked people, were you confused about COVID headlines? And not shockingly, as expected, 80% of people said they were confused. Then I also asked, where do you get your information from? And most people said they got their information from news outlets. So this can really cover a whole bunch of things. So social media news outlets, directly from watching on TV, watching on your phone. There's so many ways you can watch the news nowadays. It's not even just newspapers. So, but then that being said, a lot of people also said the most confusing source was social media. And with the increased use of social media, again, that is expected. But I think the most important thing is when I asked people what was confusing about it, because yes, we all know social media, this big bubble of everybody's opinions telling you everything and how do you shut it out. So when I asked people what was most confusing, a few things that stuck out. So misinformation, again, with social media, so many people It's hard to like verify and cross-check. Also personal opinion and not being able to separate things by fact. The amount of information out there. Personally, as someone that chose to follow this, I struggled with that. I took a little break recently because I'm just like, my brain can't compute all of that. Some people said the jargon, which I do agree with. At the beginning of the pandemic, when BBC News, UK, Boris Johnson decided to do press conferences, and their graphs were really like, there were so many people complaining about this. I remember their graphs were like harder than what you would see in uni. Like, why? Like, I wouldn't expect somebody to understand this. Like, it was just unnecessarily complicated. And then for me, the most triggering one is clickbait information. Clickbait is just disgusting. But in specifics, this is what people had to say. So the usual misconception the media promotes. And for someone with a science background, clarifying my confusion wasn't challenging, but it was often not detailed enough and didn't include reference to the original study. So another person said everyone had different opinions about it, so was confused with some of the information that was being presented to me. And like I said, it was a lot. More major news outlets, political affiliations, and that just led to misinformation. And then sensationalist headlines and very polarized and very little middle ground. I think I found that as well. When you read some news articles, it was really hard to get back to the original source. So you'll see the headline and I would have to Google like the company to find their press release. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, I could click and find their press release. Maybe they've changed that now, or maybe I wasn't looking properly, but I know that is something I did struggle with. But how do we classify this infodemic? And where did I get the word from? The WHO. The WHO at the beginning of this pandemic, when I started following and very early on, did classify this burst of information and conspiracy theories as an infodemic and something that needs to be managed very quickly. So I decided to put the question in my survey of, have people heard of this infodemic term? So 81% of people that I surveyed hadn't heard of it. A few people did take part in an infodemic survey, I think about 7. So there are people hearing about it, but is it a big thing yet? But when is it a big thing? And it also depends, like, it was a really small pool of people. But the fact that misinformation and confusion came up a lot just in this survey means people know, like, it's a problem. But that being said, I also asked, what were the reassuring sources? Because as much as there was a lot of confusing stuff in the loads of information, there was a lot of good information out there. And as someone that wanted to push information out there, it was sometimes hard because a lot of people did really good jobs already. So, yeah, there were a lot of good sources. So quickly into what made a good source. So overall, it's quite funny. You survey a bunch of people that say they have a science background, and obviously the answer is going to be they found research articles the most important. Which got me thinking, if scientists found research articles most comforting, could be for 2 reasons. It could be because that's what you're used to reading and you can then make conclusions on your own. And then that got me into thinking, okay, if scientists are comfortable because you can see the evidence and make a conclusion on your own, wouldn't the general public also be a bit more comfortable if they could see the evidence and make a conclusion on their own? And I don't mean they had to see the evidence and like read through all the science jargon in like a Nature article and a fully published to the T type of paper. What if news articles or bigger places that have the money for it, the time for it, and that is their job to do, kind of broke down the key findings? So removal of the clickbait headlines, or if you're going to put clickbait because, I don't know, money, put what is the government saying, what is scientists saying, and what is confusing and needs clarification. So for using this as an example, so you can say there is a new coronavirus variant. And what is the government saying? The government at this moment is concerned. The government is not concerned. The government are watching the progression of the variant or the number of whatever. And what a scientist is saying, you can say scientists have found that this variant doesn't differ much from other variants. They are doing tests by X, Y, Z. And then finally, you can say, these are the things that are confusing about the variants. 1, there are many variants. Two, it's hard to compare against other countries because not all countries are sequencing at the same rate, things like that. And then people can form like a general conclusion on their own. You can have a clickbait headline like, I don't know. I don't believe in clickbait. That's a damn lie. But I'm just saying, like, if it was broken down into little sections, maybe taking in that type of information would have been easier for the public. And I really do believe in allowing people to make their decision and not feeding a narrative, which the news did do. And I was very frustrated by it. And I guess for detailed words into what people said was reassuring, somebody said when they saw a journalist with a scientific background reporting the news, and this was really nice. It said, "I'm a scientist, so I trust the science. I was most comforted when I read a review about how the mRNA vaccine has been in the works since 2005. I think so. They were just waiting for the opportunity to make it mainstream, and it's not as new of a technique as most media makes it sound." Again, clickbait. Clickbait will want to tell you it's new because that is going to get the clicks. People also found it very reassuring when they saw scientists at the forefront of the news, when they saw scientists, talking about it. People also really like threads on Twitter. That is how I started mine, by doing threads. It was easy to like have a train of thought and not be as like prim and proper, and then do a thread when I really knew what I was going to talk about. I also did blog posts, but yeah, some people said they really liked CDC. And then when major news outlets had professionals talking about it, those were all things that people found very, very reassuring. So these are lessons that can be learnt in the future and then hopefully taken up quicker, and less room and comfort for the conspiracy theorists to win. But also, I also asked people that have made understanding all of this and getting through this a little easier. So there are many accounts that were mentioned, but firstly, thank you to everybody that mentioned me and said something nice, because it was nice to see that I did something little or big in helping you with your COVID decision. So yeah, thanks. But yeah, I'm gonna write down a whole bunch of people and have them listed everywhere. So when you see these names, you can for yourself also go and look at their pages for now, for later, and just again, pushing this interaction between the public and science and scientists to whoever ends up coming across this video. So communication in a pandemic, right? Communication in a pandemic is a lot. This video is quite long, but I want to get through all the answers. But communication in a pandemic, I think with the pandemic, the main problem and the main thing to fight was the people that were anti-vaccines and just the conversation around vaccination. So I asked people, for me, I think the main message was, do people understand what a vaccine does? Because it took me like a little bit of reading to properly understand it. That's from somebody with a biological science background. I should know this stuff. But I also went back, did reading quickly, and I was quickly able to understand. So I wanted to ask everybody, do you know what a vaccine does, and or do you understand the main purpose? And 94.7% of people said yes, which is amazing. So their answers range from the very, very truthful thing of stop people from dying, which is what the vaccines do, what the vaccines are meant to do, and what the vaccines have been shown within real world data to do. Somebody summed it up really, really well, saying to provide a degree of immunity amongst a significant proportion of the population in order that overall numbers reduce, the risk of transmission is lowered, and infections, if they occur, are less serious. I'm not saying perfect answer for it, but yeah, that is what a vaccine does. And then finally, to slowly end off this video, I think I really just want to talk a little bit quickly about the impact, or what does this mean for people that like science like me and want to talk about it a lot more? What does it mean for people that want to communicate science a lot more? What does it mean for the public? How can we communicate more? How can we engage more? And how do people perceive scientists? So one, people have had an increased understanding now of public health and the importance of public health science as general. Also highlighted things that areas that they've learned more about, and from the first survey hasn't changed much. So epidemiology and things like that, and anything like virology, anything really kind of related to the virus is what people have become more aware of and interested in. Also, in terms of following scientists, there was quite like, you know, people followed a bit of scientists. About 36% of people said they followed more than 10 scientists, which is a lot. And I think majority were between 0 or less than 5, which is, I guess, what I expected. But also quite strange for, I would say the people that answered this were quite heavily science-based. So again, who follows scientists, you know, like who watches your online content? Have people followed more scientists? It was kind of split, half and half, like, so majority said no. And some said yes, but it was majority, like 57%. So split. And then I guess the final thing with all of this is, for scientists and science communicators, honestly, a lot of work to communicate science and take it in, but also react the reality of a pandemic. So for people that did this as a job, thank you so much for making it so clear. For people that worked in hospitals and stuff, like, I think people underestimate, if you're really in that field as well, it's really hard for you to like communicate, think, feel, and do all of it together. So I think there is a need for more science communicators. There is a need for more continued dialogue between the patient and the public to improve their communication with scientists. And I think this was something that really stuck with me when I asked people their additional comments regarding just the whole survey, perception of science, and the pandemic. Somebody said, I would like to say, as a scientist, my interest in science has decreased, but I find the distrust and attacks on science exhausting, which has taken away some of my excitement about science. So again, in encouraging that dialogue outside of sometimes science is fun, and but really having that dialogue, asking those hard questions and having this space open. Again, another idea, continuing these Zooms, continuing these conversations, continuing to talk about science when it isn't in the headlines, having this place that people can refer to and people can track what's happening in the world. And again, as I said, just more people talking about science, so it's in daily conversation, because science affects all of us daily. Something else to tie this all in together, somebody said science is really beautiful and politics disagrees. The hard work scientists put into their jobs is oftentimes watered by foolish decisions and government policymakers, and it'll do us good if more scientists seek leadership positions in political spaces. This goes into saying the perception of science will change once you see science in places that you don't expect to see science. So yeah, I think there was a lot to learn. There was a lot to talk about. And finally, I've said finally like 4 times, but really the end is, for people that have communicated science, you shouldn't underestimate, this is me talking to myself. For people that have communicated science, you shouldn't underestimate the impact you've had, because collectively, everybody that's posted something that is accurate information has contributed to the positive discussion around COVID vaccines and the uptake and holding people accountable. So don't be shy to share your science, because we need it. And for people that want to talk to scientists again are more than happy and willing to talk about things and continuously discuss things outside of COVID. And to end, I asked people what their main concerns were following on from this. And I guess the main concerns were really new variants, lockdowns, vaccine passports. And I think the one that I probably want to go into a bit more is long COVID and the effects of long COVID. But I won't cover that in this video. It's already long enough. Hopefully either a blog post or maybe a video in a few months' time when I understand it. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and thank you again for everybody that participated in the first survey, the second survey. But yeah.